Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another video, and thanks for being with me for another one. So in this video, guys, we're going to continue learning about technology, and specifically, as you've seen in the last couple of videos, we've been focusing all things related to networking. And so in the last couple of videos, I talked a little bit about IPv4 and how all that works. And in this video, we're going to actually focus on an important piece of technology that is part of IPv4, or part of what makes the internet work, and it's called DHCP. So before jumping into things, guys, make sure you go ahead and give me a like for the video, as it helps the channel grow. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. That way you're notified whenever I upload new videos to the channel. And lastly, of course, share this video with a family member or friend, so that way they can learn all about tech. So before jumping into things, guys, let's talk a little bit about...
Honey.
Oh, wait, hold on a second. Yes?
Sorry, honey. Can you help me get on the internet?
Honey, I'm recording right now.
I know, it should be quick, please.
Okay.
Thank
fine.
you.
All right, I got to set this up so that way my wife can access the internet. All right. All right, honey, I set you up. You should be able to talk, and you should be able to get online now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, guys, so with my wife taken care of now, let's talk a little bit about DHCP and why DHCP is so important.
Daddy?
Hold on a second, guys. Yes, honey?
Can you help me get on the internet, please?
But honey, I'm recording a video for my viewers right now.
But please, I really need your help.
All right, guys, hold on a second. My daughter, she needs help getting online. All right, honey, I'll take care of that for you. Let's see. All right. So we got to set you up with an IP address. We got to set you up with a default gateway. And also as well, what else do we need to set you up with? A subnet mask, by the way, honey. And DNS, but we'll talk about DNS in another video, of course. All right, honey, you should be all set now. You're able to get online. And if you give me a couple of minutes now, I can finish recording my video.
Thank you.
You're welcome, honey. All right, guys, so with my daughter all taken care of now, finally we can talk about DHCP and learn all about it.
Hey, honey, one more device. I'm sorry.
But honey,
Can you help Aiden? Please?
I'm recording.
I know. We won't bug you after this.
Oh my God. So what, the switch now?
Yes.
All right, guys, so apparently they need to get online now with this switch. So we need to, I guess, configure another IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway. All right, honey, that's it. No more devices. I got to get this video out of the way.
I promise. No more interruptions.
All right, thank you, honey.
Thank you.
All right, guys, I think that's going to be it for this video. I've already set up 3 devices, and I don't want to keep doing this over and over again. So now you're seeing the importance of why DHCP exists. If it doesn't exist, you will be the one setting up all these IP addresses, subnet mask, and everything else that a device needs in order to communicate. And clearly, that's not a good setup. I mean, literally, if you have all these devices coming in and out of your home or in and out of your network, you are going to be responsible for doing all this work. And of course, that's tedious. We don't want to deal with that. So, hence why DHCP exists. And let's head over to the desktop now, and we can learn all about it and what happens in that process. So, without further ado, and no more interruptions on setting up devices, let's head over and learn all about it. Hey everyone, welcome to the desktop, and welcome to our next step in learning all about technology. And by the way, guys, in the last video that we made, we did pretty much a whole section on IPv4. So I talk about what an IPv4 address is, how to calculate that in the sense of translating it to binary. Then I talk about a subnet mask and also as well a prefix. And then I even talk about a default gateway. Those are 3 very important things when it comes to IPv4. And for those who are new and are seeing my channel for the first time, if you're wondering what I'm even talking about as part of my prior video, I'll go ahead and put a link in the description and possibly up on the screen as well. So if you don't see it on screen, go ahead and check out the description. But in this video, the most important thing, and especially when you're communicating over the internet, you're going to need a couple of things in order to communicate. And again, we talked about it before, which is an IPv4 address. The second thing you need is a default gateway. And then, of course, the next thing you need is a subnet mask. And those 3 things help you communicate, but there's actually some more things that you need. DHCP is very important, and you need that to work, But we'll talk about how it ties into an IPv4 address because it's not necessarily something that you really need to get out to the internet, to be quite honest with you, because there's something that's called a static IP address. All right, so for those of you guys who are wondering what the heck I just said, here's the open board. Let's go ahead and get started and jump into things. So first things first, let's talk about what a DHCP is. DHCP. All right, my handwriting is getting better as time goes on. So for those of you who are wondering what the heck DHCP even means, it stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. All right, so DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. So when we think about what does this even mean, so let's talk about it, and that way you can see exactly how this works and why it's very, very important. So remember last time I did a drawing, it looked like a cloud, but I'm gonna say, there it is. This is gonna be my network. And let's say in our network we have computer 1, then we have computer 2, and let's say you have your router. So remember from our last video, we actually had a network, and by the way, we can put an arrow here and we say our network is 192.168.1.0. So this is going to be our network, and let's go ahead and say network right under here. All right, so 192.168.1.0, that's our network. Now, of course, that's this whole entire thing in here that encompasses everything. Computer 1, computer 2, router, everything. So now the next item on the list is, of course, we need to give an IP address to every single device that's talking on the network, and of course, including the router. So I'm going to make a nice little arrow over here, and we're going to say 192.168.1.1. So that is the IP address for our router. Now guys, if you recall, this network is a /24, or that is a prefix. And remember, if you watched the last video, I showed you how to translate that into a subnet mask. And the subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. Now, if we do the math on that, you realize that, of course, 192.168.1.2 all the way down to 254. This is IP addresses that we can give out to all these computers out on the network. So let's take a pause there and just recap. So 192.168.1.0, that is our network. Then the next one on the list is 192.168.1.1, that is our router. Now computer 1, computer 2, that can be an IP address of 192.168.1.2 all the way down to 254. Now the last one that we talked about last time is 192.168.1.255. So that is our broadcast. So again, this is all the IP addresses that are available to us, because remember, /24 tells us our network, and then the remaining 8 bits gives us our host of what can be on our network. And of course, host stands for our computer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. Okay, so we understand now this whole entire network. We understand now that we have this block of IP addresses that go from 2 to 254 because the other 3 are taken up by the network, the router, and the broadcast itself. Now the next question is, when these computers are coming up online for the first time, meaning they're getting ready to talk, how do you know what IP addresses they should get? Can anyone tell me? You got it. That is where Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol comes into play. So now that we scroll down here a little bit, let's talk a little bit about what happens when it comes to Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol and how it's able to get one of these IP addresses that you see here. So specifically 2 to 254. How does it know? So if you didn't know, in this protocol here that these computers have built into them, they actually leverage this protocol to go ahead and talk to the router and ask the router for an IP address. Essentially, that is what DHCP is in a nutshell. And it does that in 4 different steps. And this is actually called DORA. And you may be wondering, well, what does DORA stand for? Well, DORA stands for discover, offer, request, and acknowledge. Those are the 4 steps. So let's write exactly what this means. So step number 1 is called discover. So what happens in the discovery phase? So again, when this computer, let's say computer 1, joins the network by you plugging in the Ethernet cable, or you connect it to the Wi-Fi network using that SSID is what they call it, or the network name, and you type in the password, and it finally joins that network. Computer 1 actually sends the router what is called a DHCP discover message. So it sends a message throughout the network, and specifically it hits the router, and it's called a DHCP discover message. And it does this because it doesn't know where your DHCP server is. Now remember, this DHCP server that's running somewhere out in the network, and typically on your home networks at home, they run on your router, which is why I'm giving you this example here. The computer doesn't know that, of course, so it sends out this message over the entire network saying, hey, I have this discovery message. Hey, whoever's out there in the world that is a DHCP server, please let me know that you're out there. And essentially, that's what this DHCP discover message is. And it sends this via a protocol called UDP. Now, we're not going to touch on exactly what UDP is because this is more on in-depth networking. But just know this is a best case delivery protocol, meaning I'm going to send my information out there and hopefully I get a response. Essentially, that's exactly what UDP is. And it sends this on what is called port 67. Now, here's the thing, guys. If you're asking exactly what a port is, let's break that down real quick so that way folks are not lost and confused about that. So let's say I'm trying to communicate with this computer over here. And this computer has an IP address of, and of course I'm going to make this up, but 192.168.1.86. Sure, why not? So if I'm sending a message to this computer and I'm addressing it by this 192.168.1.86, how do I know that the message that I'm sending could be for a website? Maybe it can be for SSH. Maybe it can be for, as you see here, a response to this DHCP request, right? This one computer can be running multiple applications on there and it can be doing multiple things. And if we send information to this computer via this one IP address, how do we know for a fact that the message in which it was intended for, let's just say a website, let's say it's just an SSH connection, or let's just say, as an example, for the last one, a response to that DHCP message that we sent earlier, how do we route it to the right place in the computer? And that's exactly what a port is. A port is a specific apartment within that address. So when you think about sending a letter to a big apartment complex and you have the address of the apartment complex, but then you need to address it to an apartment within that apartment complex, essentially that is a great analogy for a port. And so if you're curious, a port has 16 bits. And if you watched my last video, you know exactly what I mean when I say bits. So we bring up our nice little calculator here because, again, I always told you guys leverage your tools. Do not be afraid to leverage those tools. So 2 to the 16th power, what does that give us? That gives us a total of 65,536 total ports. So you can communicate on any one of these ports and it'll get you directly to the specific application that you need. So in our case, if you think about a website, typically a website is port 80. SSH typically is port 22. And of course, when we're talking about a DHCP discovery message and we want to communicate out there, we typically do that on port 67. Now, if you're asking me, hey, how do you know all these ports? This is what is called commonly known ports, because all computers communicate on the same ports when it comes to specific things. Okay, so we figured out what a port is. Back to DORA now. So the computer sends a DHCP discover message out there on the network and it says, hey, what servers, DHCP servers, live out there? Now remember, a DHCP server lives somewhere out in the network, and its sole purpose and its job is to go ahead and respond to these messages when a computer connects to the network. And it goes ahead and responds with critical information that the computer needs in order to communicate. So let's talk a little bit about what happens next after the computer sends a message out in the network in order to say, hey, who's out there for a DHCP server? And that leads us to number 2. Let's talk a little bit now on the second stage, and of course the second stage is offer. So what happens in this stage? Now in the offer stage, the router actually sends an information back, and the reason why the router sends this information back is because, remember, typically in a home network, meaning what you and I use at home, the router tends to be your DHCP server. In the first stage, the computer is talking to the network and it sends a message over port 67 to the entire network and says, hey, any DHCP servers out there, I am trying to discover you. I need information in order to get online. And again, this is where the second stage comes in now. And this is the offer stage where the router says, oh, okay, I'm a DHCP server. I got your message. I'm going to respond back to you. And by the way, when I respond back to you, that is also happening on UDP, and that is port 68. So it actually responds back on port 68 because, again, port 67 is to send the message to the DHCP server, but the response comes back on port 68. Now, by the way, when the DHCP server responds, it can be actually more than one response. And what I mean by that is you can have multiple DHCP servers running on the network, so keep that in mind. So again, one or more DHCP server responds to this DHCP offer message that happened in stage 1, or what I call the discover stage. And so what you get out of this response, and let's take a look at that message, you get an available IP address, you get a subnet mask, a gateway, a lease time, and a couple of other options. But the more important ones that we're going to talk about is the IP address, the subnet mask, the gateway, and the lease time. So let's write that down. Now that computer 1 has received all of these 4 items in its message, the next item on the list, and we'll scroll down here a little bit, let's say number 3, and we call this request. Now keep in mind, guys, in the request stage, our computer 1, which is the client now, it actually sends a message back to the DHCP server, and it says, hey, I am going to select the offer or one of the offers that I received when it came to that DHCP request message. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm going to request the specific IP address that you gave me. And so if you're asking, why is it requesting that specific IP address? Well, remember, in step 2, you could have received multiple responses to that message. So essentially, you could have received multiple IP addresses with a subnet mask, a default gateway, and a lease time. So in step 3, you send a message back to the router saying, hey, I accept one of those particular messages that you sent. Once that happens, we then go into stage 4. So step 4 is the acknowledge stage. So here in this stage, the DHCP server, of course, which is our router, it now sends a message back to the client, which is computer 1, and it is actually confirming the acknowledgement and confirming the lease. And then this is where now the computer 1 or client takes the information that it confirmed from the router or the DHCP server, and then it goes ahead and configures itself with that proper information. So let's run through an example and take a look at that example together so that way we can see all 4 stages happening at the same time. So real quickly, if I were to go up here, so again, let's pretend like this computer 1 or our client is coming onto the network for the first time ever. It has no idea about anything besides if I'm connecting to it via Wi-Fi, I put in the password. I'm now able to authenticate with the network and get on. That's either the first route if you're going through wireless, or if you're connecting with Ethernet, you plug in that Ethernet cable into the network for the first time. And of course, what happens is, as we talked about already, a DHCP discover message goes out and it says, hey, I'm a new client. I need an IP address. Can somebody help me here? And of course, if you're in a home network, typically that's your router. Your router is a DHCP server, and it's waiting and listening on port 67 for that message. That's when we jump into stage 2. So stage 2 now, it says, hey, I got your message, which is, of course, the DHCP server, which is our router, and that's typically in a home network. So our router responds back and it says, hey, client 1 or computer 1, I have an IP address, a subnet mask, a default gateway, and a lease time for you. In step 2, let's say you get an IP address of 192.168.1.2, or you get 3. And the reason why you get 2 different IP addresses is because, remember, one or more DHCP servers can actually respond. So we can point this to IP. Now the subnet mask, of course, is going to be 255.255.255.0. Our default gateway is going to be 192.168.1.1. And then our lease time can be, hey, your lease expires 3 days from now. So again, when it receives this offer now, you can pick between 2 different IP addresses, and those 2 different IP addresses have the same subnet mask, default gateway, and that lease time. So everything is the same, except you can choose now between 2 different IP addresses. And this is where now the request comes into play, where client 1 says, hey, I'm going to accept your offer, what you offered me in the previous step, and it sends that back to the DHCP server, which is the router, except it's very specific in what it's accepting. Remember, when it's getting these IP addresses and it's multiple IP addresses, that means multiple messages are coming. So I have to pick one of the messages. And so in this case, we'll choose, let's say, the IP address 192.168.1.2. So if we go up here, essentially we accepted the first IP address with the same subnet mask. So let's say subnet mask, same gateway, and then the same lease, which was 3 days. So all of these guys here was a message that we decided to pick based off of what was offered. And this was offered all up here. So we basically chose one of the messages, and now that we sent that message saying, hey, we're going to accept the offer from the DHCP server, this comes down to the 4th stage, which is the acknowledgement stage. And the acknowledgement is when the DHCP server says, hey, I acknowledge that you decided to go ahead and pick IP address 192.168.1.2. Go ahead and configure yourself now. So this is where the client will configure based off of the IP address and everything that it chose. So it's going to say 192.168.1.2, subnet mask 255.255.255.0, default gateway 192.168.1.1, and then lease 3 days. So all this stuff gets configured on the fly now by client 1, and now it has everything that it needs in order to talk and go out to the outside world. So now let's take a look at this in the Windows world, so that way you can see exactly how this looks in Windows. And by the way, guys, we are going to go into the control panel, and we're going to go into the network and sharing center, and we're going to actually click on our network interface card, and we can go into the details and see all this. And remember, in my last video, I actually showed you how to do this. So go check out my last video if you don't know how to do it. So I'm going to throw up a screenshot here on the screen so that way you can see all of this. So here we are, guys. Here is a screenshot of my network card on my Windows 11 machine. And remember, I showed you guys how to get this information here, so you should know based off of my previous video. So if we take a look here now, this is, of course, the description, which is the name of my adapter. Now, the important thing, as we see here, is DHCP enabled. Now, remember, we talked about what DHCP is. DHCP, what that means, and of course, you're able to dynamically get an IP address. So it tells you, yes, it's enabled. And now you're seeing my IP address. So if I were to take a look here, my IP address is 192.168.1.49. So remember, when all this stuff was happening, DORA, right, steps 1 through 4, it requested an IP address, and that IP address is based off of all the IP addresses that are available for this network. And remember, it was 2 through 254. Why? Because 0 is our network, 1 is our default gateway, which is the router, 2 to 254 is all the IP addresses available for devices, and of course, the last one is reserved for broadcast, as you're seeing right over here on the right-hand side. So if we scroll down again, remember, step 1, it's saying, hey, I need an IP address. Step 2, which is the offer, the router or the DHCP server offers up some IP addresses. And in my particular case, if I were to scroll down, it happened to be 49 at the time. Now, it also said, hey, here's also your subnet mask, your default gateway. Let's take a look at those two. So if you see here, the next one on the list is your subnet mask, which is 255.255.255.0. And of course, your default gateway, which is who you communicate with, which is the router. That is 192.168.1.1. Now, the next item on the list here, as you're seeing, and we didn't talk about it yet, was the lease time. When does this IP address expire? So if we go down some more and we actually see here, it tells us, hey, your lease was obtained July 9th at 12:02 and 47 seconds p.m. And of course, that's Eastern time, my time. And when does your lease expires? Well, your lease expires, looks like Saturday, July 12th, and that is going to be at 12:25:39 p.m. So the hours is 12, the minutes is 25, and the seconds is 39 seconds. So what do we have? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So our lease time, instead of actually 3 days like I put in the example, it's actually 4 days. In real world, this is a real world screenshot. So again, if we go back up here now, once we get this offer, the computer actually sends an accept and says, hey, I'll accept the IP address, which is exactly what it accepted, right? And it was 49. And so the router, which is our DHCP server, which is the last one, it sends an acknowledgement back to the client, which was my Windows 11 machine, and says, okay, go ahead and configure yourself with all these different things that you need in order to talk on this network and also as well leave the network. And again, that is IPv4 address, subnet mask, when your lease was obtained and when it expires, and then of course the default gateway. Remember how I told you guys the default gateway is your router, which typically in home networks is also your DHCP server? Well, you guessed it. If you look at the screenshot here, your default gateway is the same thing as your DHCP server, because your DHCP server is what lives in your router. It is what is running all the time, waiting for folks to say, hey, I need a new IP address. That can be smartphones, that can be tablets, computers, whatever. So now guys, at this point with the last video and this video, you now know everything that is on here except for the DNS server. And of course, we'll tackle the DNS server in another video. But isn't it interesting, in 2 videos now, you know exactly what all this stuff means. Of course, I'm not showing you the physical address because the physical address is my MAC address. And we all know I don't want you to have the social security number to my device. Not a good thing to have. But besides that, you guys know everything that is within this bracket here. Whereas before, you were probably looking at it and saying, I don't even know what the heck none of this stuff means. So that's pretty cool. So if I were to take a look at this now in the Linux world, how does this look like in the Linux world? So here is my Linux machine. So one of the things that I can do here on my machine is I can type in nmcli connection show. And it shows us all the available connections on our machine. And specifically what I care about is actually the one that says system EMP0S3. And the reason why I care about that one is because that is technically the Ethernet cable that's plugged in into this virtual machine, or essentially this Linux machine. So I can do nmcli connection show and then type in the name of the interface that I'm interested in, which is system EMP0S3. Let's hit enter here. And if we scroll down here a little bit, the way that we know that this particular machine here has DHCP enabled is in this section here where it says IPv4 method and it's set to auto. That means that it is leveraging DHCP in order to receive its IP address, its subnet mask, its lease obtain and expire date. And then lastly, of course, it has a default gateway. All of that stuff is being automatically sent over because it's using DHCP, and we know that by seeing IPv4 method is set to auto. And of course, if you're interested in seeing all the particulars of the IP address, the gateway, so on and so forth, we can go down here and you can see that our IP address in this particular box is 192.168.1.240, and we have a prefix of /24, which means the same thing as a subnet mask of 255, 255, 255.0. And remember, I explained that in the previous video how that works. And of course, you have your broadcast, which I mentioned is 255. I showed you guys that before. And remember, it even tells you the DHCP server. And it's under here where it says DHCP server identifier. So 192.168.1.1. And it even tells you your lease time. So here is your lease time. It tells you how long the lease lasts for before you have to give up that IP address. Now that you guys have learned so much about DHCP, you may be asking yourself, well, why would I care about all this stuff, and why even have something that expires, right? When we look at this lease and we are able to get this IP address only for a limited amount of time, why do I care about having it expired? I mean, there's a lot of great questions here. And so real quickly, we'll touch on some of the things that are important of why this service called DHCP is so important. So if we look at the first benefit of having this DHCP server is that imagine you having to take every single computer that ever joins your network and you have to go in there and say, hey, I'm going to give you an IP address. This is what's going to be your IP address. I'm going to give you a subnet mask. This is what your subnet mask is going to be. I'm going to give you a default gateway. And this is what that is going to look like as well. And of course, a DNS server. And we'll talk about what that is in another video. But if I were to go to look at some of these items here, IPv4, subnet mask, default gateway, DHCP server, and then of course DNS server. So imagine taking these 5 things and then you're going to configure on 50 computers. You see how that starts to become very cumbersome? You're not going to sit there and start typing on 50 computers and saying, hey, this is what's going to be your IP address and all this other pieces of information. That gets very tedious and quite inefficient of somebody's time. So this is where a DHCP comes into play because it'll send all this information and the computer can go ahead and self-configure. Or should I say the client, because it can be other things. It can be cell phones, it can be tablets. It doesn't necessarily have to be computers. So that is one great benefit of DHCP. Now let's talk about another benefit, right? So when we look at our IP address pool, and remember our IP address is from 2 to 254. That's all we have to give devices that join our network. So remember, if you have 2 to 254, there's only a certain amounts of IP addresses that are available. So what starts to happen is as you start giving out all these IP addresses, and let's say, for example, the lease never expires, after some time, when you have all your devices connected, and let's say you have family members that come over, they bring their devices, and over time, you're going to run out of IP addresses because you gave them out to somebody somewhere at some time. Are you going to keep track of who you gave the IP addresses to and when you should remove that from your network? Right? That is where these leases come into play. So let's say computer 1 is your laptop and you always have it at your house and you give it an IP address, and then this computer 2 is visiting and you give that an IP address. So let's say this computer 1 has an IP address of same thing. The network is 192.168.1.0, and this gets 2, this gets 3, all the way to 4, all the way to 254. So let's say you gave out all these IP addresses and computer 1 is the only one that stays on your network because you own it. Everybody else is just visiting your house for the first time, but you never got rid of them. So that means now when another device, let's say you buy a smartphone and bring it into your house, that smartphone now can't connect to your network because it doesn't have any available IP addresses. And this is where having this lease and having it expires means that the IP addresses go back to a pool of IP addresses and can be sent out to another device. And that is one of the benefits of having a DHCP server on your network to give out these IP addresses, so that way when devices come in and out of your house, they can give up those IP addresses when they're done using them. So if I had to sum it up in one word, or should I say 2 words, a dynamic network, that's actually 3, a dynamic network. So 2 words, dynamic network is what describes what a DHCP server can do for you. It reduces how much you have to manage when it comes to configuring clients on your network. And number two, it allows you to really scale your network and allow for mobility when devices come in and out of your network. So welcome back, guys. And by now, you guys should know everything there is to know about DHCP and how that entire process works. And also as well, you're seeing the benefit of being able to automatically configure devices so that way they can talk on the network. So that way your wife and kids or anybody in your household will not continuously bug you just to be able to get all this information to be able to get online. I mean, that can be a real pain in the butt, even though, of course, I love my family. Plus, on top of that, you also started to see that as these devices come in and out of your network, whether you turn them off or they go somewhere else physically, it really helps to be able to take that information, aka the IP address, the subnet mask, all that good stuff that gets handed to the devices, and that can go back into a pool in order to be given out to another device that comes into your network in order to be able to communicate, right? It conserves those IP addresses that we talked about for later devices that they can use. So guys, hopefully you learned something in this video. Hopefully it helped out a lot. And by the way, if there's anything that you weren't sure of, just go ahead and watch the video over and over again because this will all make sense. Remember, practice makes perfect. And of course, as I always say, we're always building on ideas and concepts of previous videos. So not only will I put a link to the previous video that I did on IP, but also as well in the description, I'll put a link to the playlist and you can learn all about tech and get yourself up to speed for those who are finding me for the first time. So again, guys, that'll do it for this video. I love you guys. I appreciate you. And of course, if this video has helped you out, make sure you give me a like for the video as it helps the channel grow. Subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications so you're notified when I upload new videos to the channel. And lastly, of course, make sure you share this with a family member or a friend. And by the way, guys, if you don't want to wait for my next video to drop, YouTube thinks that you'll like this video popping up on screen. So go ahead and check that video out. And until the next time, I'll see you guys later.